You are assigned to maintain a Google Kubernetes Engine (GKE) cluster named Dev that was deployed on Google Cloud. You want to manage the GKE configuration using the Command Line Interface (CLI). You have just downloaded and installed the Cloud SDK. You want to ensure that future CLI commands by default address this specific cluster. What should you do? A. Use the command git cloud config set container cluster dev. B. Use the command git cloud container clusters update dev. C. Create a file called gke default in the ~gcloud folder that contains the cluster name. D. Create a file called defaults ysun in the ~gulatats cloud folder that contains the cluster name. You want to configure auto-healing for network load balancing for a group of Compute Engine instances that run in multiple zones, using the fewest possible steps. You need to configure recreation of VMs if they are unresponsive after 3 attempts of 10 seconds each. What should you do? A. Create an HTTP load balancer with a backend configuration that references an existing instance group. Set the health check to healthy HTTPB. Create an HTTP load balancer with a backend configuration that references an existing instance group. Define a balancing mode and set the maximum RPS to 10. C. Create a managed instance group. Set the auto-healing health check to healthy HTTPD. Create a managed instance group. Verify that the auto-scaling setting is on. You have an instance group that you want to load balance. You want the load balancer to terminate the client SSL session. The instance group is used to serve a public web application over HTTPS. You want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. Configure an HTTPS load balancer. B. Configure an internal TCP load balancer. C. Configure an external SSL proxy load balancer. D. Configure an external TCP proxy load balancer. You are running out of primary internal IP addresses in a subnet for a custom mode VPC. The subnet has the IP range 10.0.0.0/20, and the IP addresses are primarily used by virtual machines in the project. You need to provide more IP addresses for the virtual machines. What should you do? A. Add a secondary IP range 10.1.0.0/20 to the subnet. B. Change the subnet IP range from 10.0.0.0/20 to 10.0.0.0.0/18. C. Change the subnet IP range from 10.0.0.0/20 to 10.0.0.0.0/22. D. Convert the subnet IP range from IPv4 to IPv6. You have deployed an application on a single Compute Engine instance. The application writes logs to disk. Users start reporting errors with the application. You want to diagnose the problem. What should you do? A. Navigate to Cloud Logging and view the application logs. B. Configure a health check on the instance and set a consecutive successes healthy threshold value of 1. C. Connect to the instance's serial console and read the application logs. D. Install and configure the Ops agent and view the logs from Cloud Logging. The DevOps group in your organization needs full control of Compute Engine resources in your development project. However, they should not have permission to create or update any other resources in the project. You want to follow Google's recommendations for setting permissions for the DevOps group. What should you do? A. Grant the basic role roles/viewer and the predefined role roles/compute admin to the DevOps group. B. Create an IAM policy and grant all compute instance admin permissions to the policy. Attach the policy to the DevOps group. C. Create a custom role at the folder level and grant all compute instance admin permissions to the role. Grant the custom role to the DevOps group. D. Grant the basic role roles editor to the DevOps group. Your application stores files on cloud storage by using the standard storage class. The application only requires access to files created in the last 30 days. You want to automatically save costs on files that are no longer accessed by the application. What should you do? A. Create an object lifecycle on the storage bucket to change the storage class to archive storage for objects with an age over 30 days. B. Create a cron job in Cloud Scheduler to call a Cloud Functions instance every day to delete files older than 30 days. C. Create a retention policy on the storage bucket of 30 days and lock the bucket by using a retention policy lock. D. Enable object versioning on the storage bucket and add lifecycle rules to expire non-current versions after 30 days. You have deployed an application on a compute engine instance. An external consultant needs to access the Linux-based instance. The consultant is connected to your corporate network through a VPN connection, but the consultant has no Google account. What should you do? A. Instruct the external consultant to use the GRAC Cloud Compute SSH command line tool by using Identity-Aware Proxy to access the instance. B. Instruct the external consultant to use the G-Cloud Compute SSH command line tool by using the public IP address of the instance to access it. C. Instruct the external consultant to generate an SSH key pair and request the public key from the consultant. Add the public key to the instance yourself and have the consultant access the instance through SSH with their private key. D. Instruct the external consultant to generate an SSH key pair and request the private key from the consultant. Add the private key to the instance yourself and have the consultant access the instance through SSH with their public key. Your company has a Google Cloud Platform project that uses BigQuery for data warehousing. Your data science team changes frequently and has few members. You need to allow members of this team to perform queries. You want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. 1. Create an IAM entry for each data scientist user account. 2. Assign the BigQuery job user role to the group. B. 1. Create an IAM entry for each data scientist user account. 2. Assign the BigQuery data viewer user role to the group. C. 1. Create a dedicated Google group in Cloud Identity. 2. Add each data scientist's user account to the group. 3. Assign the BigQuery job user role to the group. D. 1. Create a dedicated Google group in Cloud Identity. 2. Add each data scientist's user account to the group. 3. Assign the BigQuery data viewer user role to the group. You recently deployed a new version of an application to App Engine and then discovered a bug in the release. You need to immediately revert to the prior version of the application. What should you do? A. Run Grow Cloud App Restore. B. On the App Engine page of the GCP console, select the application that needs to be reverted and click Revert. C. On the App Engine Versions page of the GCP console, route 100% of the traffic to the previous version. D. Deploy the original version as a separate application. Then go to App Engine Settings and split traffic between applications so that the original version serves 100% of the requests. You have sensitive data stored in 3 cloud storage buckets and have enabled data access logging. You want to verify activities for a particular user for these buckets, using the fewest possible steps. You need to verify the addition of metadata labels and which files have been viewed from those buckets. What should you do? A. Using the GCP console, filter the activity log to view the information. B. Using the GCP console, filter the Stackdriver log to view the information. C. View the bucket in the storage section of the GCP console. D. Create a trace in Stackdriver to view the information. Your organization needs to grant users access to query datasets in BigQuery, but prevent them from accidentally deleting the datasets. You want a solution that follows Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. Add users to roles/BigQuery user role only, instead of roles/BigQuery data owner. B. Add users to roles/BigQuery data editor role only, instead of roles/BigQuery data owner. C. Create a custom role by removing delete permissions and add users to that role only. D. Create a custom role by removing delete permissions. Add users to the group, and then add the group to the custom role. You are performing a monthly security check of your Google Cloud environment and want to know who has access to view data stored in your Google Cloud project. What should you do? A. Enable audit logs for all APIs that are related to data storage. B. Review the IAM permissions for any role that allows for data access. C. Review the identity-aware proxy settings for each resource. D. Create a data loss prevention job. You have a Compute Engine instance hosting an application used between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. on weekdays. You want to back up this instance daily for disaster recovery purposes. You want to keep the backups for 30 days. You want the Google recommended solution with the least management overhead and the least number of services. What should you do? A. 1. Update your instance's metadata to add the following value. Snapshot O schedule 01***2. Update your instance's metadata to add the following value. Snapshot A retention 30. B. 1. In the Cloud Console, go to the Compute Engine Disks page and select your instance's disk. 2. In the Snapshot Schedule section, select Create Schedule and configure the following parameters. Schedule frequency. Daily. Start time. 1 a.m. O 2 a.m. Auto-delete snapshots after 30 days. C1. Create a cloud function that creates a snapshot of your instance's disk. 2. Create a cloud function that deletes snapshots that are older than 30 days. 3. Use Cloud Scheduler to trigger both cloud functions daily at 1 a.m. D1. Create a bash script in the instance that copies the content of the disk to cloud storage. 2. Create a bash script in the instance that deletes data older than 30 days in the backup cloud storage bucket. 3. Configure the instance's cron tab to execute these scripts daily at 1 a.m. Your company publishes large files on an Apache web server that runs on a compute engine instance. The Apache web server is not the only application running in the project. You want to receive an email when the egress network costs for the server exceed $100 for the current month, as measured by Google Cloud. What should you do? A. Set up a budget alert on the project with an amount of $100, a threshold of 100%, and notification type of €Euro email. €. B. Set up a budget alert on the billing account with an amount of $100, a threshold of 100%, and notification type of €Euro email. €. C. Export the billing data to BigQuery. Create a cloud function that uses BigQuery to sum the egress network costs of the exported billing data for the Apache web server for the current month, and sends an email if it is over $100. Schedule the cloud function using Cloud Scheduler to run hourly. D. Use the Cloud Logging agent to export the Apache web server logs to Cloud Logging. Create a cloud function that uses BigQuery to parse the HTTP response log data in Cloud Logging for the current month and sends an email if the size of all HTTP responses multiplied by current Google Cloud egress prices totals over $100. Schedule the cloud function using Cloud Scheduler to run hourly. Your Dataproc cluster runs in a single virtual private cloud (VPC) network in a single subnet with range 172.16.20.128/25. There are no private IP addresses available in the VPC network. You want to add new VMs to communicate with your cluster using the minimum number of steps. What should you do? A. Modify the existing subnet range to 172.16.20.0/24. B. Create a new secondary IP range in the VPC and configure the VMs to use that range. C. Create a new VPC network for the VMs. Enable VPC peering between the VM's VPC network and the Dataproc cluster VPC network. D. Create a new VPC network for the VMs with a subnet of 172.32.0.0/16. Enable VPC network peering between the Dataproc VPC network and the VM's VPC network. Configure a custom root exchange. You have production and test workloads that you want to deploy on Compute Engine. Production VMs need to be in a different subnet than the test VMs. All the VMs must be able to reach each other over internal IP without creating additional routes. You need to set up VPC and the two subnets. Which configuration meets these requirements? A. Create a single custom VPC with two subnets. Create each subnet in a different region and with a different CIDR range. B. Create a single custom VPC with two subnets. Create each subnet in the same region and with the same CIDR range. C. Create two custom VPCs, each with a single subnet. Create each subnet in a different region and with a different CIDR range. D. Create two custom VPCs, each with a single subnet. Create each subnet in the same region and with the same CIDR range. You need a dynamic way of provisioning VMs on Compute Engine. The exact specifications will be in a dedicated configuration file. You want to follow Google's recommended practices. Which method should you use? A. Deployment Manager. B. Cloud Composer. C. Managed Instance Group. D. Unmanaged Instance Group. You are building an archival solution for your data warehouse and have selected cloud storage to archive your data. Your users need to be able to access this archived data once a quarter for some regulatory requirements. You want to select a cost-efficient option. Which storage option should you use? A. Cold storage. B. Nearline storage. C. Regional storage. D. Multi-regional storage. You need to create a custom VPC with a single subnet. The subnet's range must be as large as possible. Which range should you use? A. 0.0.0.0/0. B. 10.0.0.0/8. C. 172.16.0.0/12D. 192.168.0.0/16. Every employee of your company has a Google account. Your operational team needs to manage a large number of instances on Compute Engine. Each member of this team needs only administrative access to the servers. Your security team wants to ensure that the deployment of credentials is operationally efficient and must be able to determine who accessed a given instance. What should you do? A. Generate a new SSH key pair. Give the private key to each member of your team. Configure the public key in the metadata of each instance. B. Ask each member of the team to generate a new SSH key pair and to send you their public key. Use a configuration management tool to deploy those keys on each instance. C. Ask each member of the team to generate a new SSH key pair and to add the public key to their Google account. Grant the Eurocompute OS admin login Euro role to the Google group corresponding to this team. D. Generate a new SSH key pair. Give the private key to each member of your team. Configure the public key as a project-wide public SSH key in your cloud platform project, and allow project-wide public SSH keys on each instance. Your company wants to standardize the creation and management of multiple Google Cloud resources using infrastructure as code. You want to minimize the amount of repetitive code needed to manage the environment. What should you do? A. Develop templates for the environment using Cloud Deployment Manager. B. Use curl in a terminal to send a REST request to the relevant Google API for each individual resource. C. Use the Cloud Console interface to provision and manage all related resources. D. Create a bash script that contains all requirement steps as Gray Cloud commands. You are in charge of provisioning access for all Google Cloud users in your organization. Your company recently acquired a startup company that has their own Google Cloud organization. You need to ensure that your site reliability engineers, SREs, have the same project permissions in the startup company's organization as in your own organization. What should you do? A. In the Google Cloud Console for your organization, select Create Role from Selection and choose Destination as the startup company's organization. B. In the Google Cloud Console for the startup company, select Create Role from Selection and choose Source as the startup company's Google Cloud organization. C. Use the gcloud IAM-roles copy command and provide the organization ID of the startup company's Google Cloud organization as the destination. D. Use the gcloud IAM-roles copy command and provide the project IDs of all projects in the startup company's organization as the destination. You have an object in a cloud storage bucket that you want to share with an external company. The object contains sensitive data. You want access to the content to be removed after 4 hours. The external company does not have a Google account, to which you can grant specific user-based access privileges. You want to use the most secure method that requires the fewest steps. What should you do? A. Create a signed URL with a 4-hour expiration and share the URL with the company. B. Set object access to public and use object lifecycle management to remove the object after 4 hours. C. Configure the storage bucket as a static website and furnish the object's URL to the company. Delete the object from the storage bucket after 4 hours. D. Create a new cloud storage bucket specifically for the external company to access. Copy the object to that bucket. Delete the bucket after 4 hours have passed. Your organization is a financial company that needs to store audit log files for 3 years. Your organization has hundreds of Google Cloud projects. You need to implement a cost-effective approach for log file retention. What should you do? A. Create an export to the sink that saves logs from Cloud Audit to BigQuery. B. Create an export to the sink that saves logs from Cloud Audit to a ColdLine storage bucket. C. Write a custom script that uses Logging API to copy the logs from Stackdriver logs to BigQuery. D. Export these logs to Cloud Pub Sub and write a Cloud Data Flow pipeline to store logs to Cloud SQL. You are working with a Cloud SQL MySQL database at your company. You need to retain a month-end copy of the database for 3 years for audit purposes. What should you do? A. Set up an export job for the first of the month. Write the export file to an archive class cloud storage bucket. B. Save the automatic first of the month backup for 3 years. Store the backup file in an archive class cloud storage bucket. C. Set up an on-demand backup for the first of the month. Write the backup to an archive class cloud storage bucket. D. Convert the automatic first of the month backup to an export file. Write the export file to a ColdLine class cloud storage bucket. You need to configure IAM Access Audit logging in BigQuery for external auditors. You want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. Add the auditors group to the logging viewer and BigQuery data viewer predefined IAM roles. B. Add the auditors group to 2 new custom IAM roles. C. Add the auditor user accounts to the logging viewer and BigQuery data viewer predefined IAM roles. D. Add the auditor user accounts to 2 new custom IAM roles. You are configuring service accounts for an application that spans multiple projects. Virtual machines, VMs, running in the Web Applications project need access to BigQuery datasets in the CRM Databases project. You want to follow Google recommended practices to grant access to the service account in the Web Applications project. What should you do? A. Grant project owner for web applications appropriate roles to CRM databases. B. Grant project owner role to CRM databases and the Web Applications project. C. Grant project owner role to CRM databases and roles/BigQuery data viewer role to web applications. D. Grant roles/BigQuery data viewer role to CRM databases and appropriate roles to web applications. An employee was terminated, but their access to Google Cloud was not removed until 2 weeks later. You need to find out if this employee accessed any sensitive customer information after their termination. What should you do? A. View system event logs in Cloud Logging. Search for the user's email as the principal. B. View system event logs in Cloud Logging. Search for the service account associated with the user. C. View data access audit logs in Cloud Logging. Search for the user's email as the principal. D. View the admin activity log in Cloud Logging. Search for the service account associated with the user. The sales team has a project named Sales Data Digest that has the ID Acme Data Digest. You need to set up similar Google Cloud resources for the marketing team, but their resources must be organized independently of the sales team. What should you do? A. Grant the project editor role to the marketing team for Acme Data Digest. B. Create a project lien on Acme Data Digest and then grant the project editor role to the marketing team. C. Create another project with the ID Acme Marketing Data Digest for the marketing team and deploy the resources there. D. Create a new project named Marketing Data Digest and use the ID Acme Data Digest. Grant the project editor role to the marketing team. You are hosting an application from Compute Engine Virtual Machines, VMs, in US Central 1 A. You want to adjust your design to support the failure of a single Compute Engine zone, eliminate downtime, and minimize cost. What should you do? A. Euro. Create Compute Engine resources in US Euro Central 1 Euro B. Euro. Balance the load across both US Euro Central 1 Euro and US Euro Central 1 Euro B. B. Sony Euro. Create a managed instance group and specify US Euro Central 1 Euro as the zone. Euro. Configure the health check with a short health interval. C. Euro. Create an HTTPS load balancer. Euro. Create one or more global forwarding rules to direct traffic to your VMs. D. Euro. Perform regular backups of your application. Euro. Create a cloud monitoring alert and be notified if your application becomes unavailable. Euro. Restore from backups when notified. Your company runs one batch process in an on-premises server that takes around 30 hours to complete. The task runs monthly, can be performed offline, and must be restarted if interrupted. You want to migrate this workload to the cloud while minimizing cost. What should you do? A. Create an instance template with Spot VMs on. Create a managed instance group from the template and adjust target CPU utilization. Migrate the workload. B. Migrate the workload to a Compute Engine VM. Start and stop the instance as needed. C. Migrate the workload to a Google Kubernetes Engine cluster with Spot nodes. D. Migrate the workload to a Compute Engine Spot VM. You want to add a new auditor to a Google Cloud Platform project. The auditor should be allowed to read, but not modify, all project items. How should you configure the auditor's permissions? A. Create a custom role with view-only project permissions. Add the user's account to the custom role. B. Create a custom role with view-only service permissions. Add the user's account to the custom role. C. Select the built-in IAM project viewer role. Add the user's account to this role. D. Select the built-in IAM service viewer role. Add the user's account to this role. Your company has an existing GCP organization with hundreds of projects and a billing account. Your company recently acquired another company that also has hundreds of projects and its own billing account. You would like to consolidate all GCP costs of both GCP organizations onto a single invoice. You would like to consolidate all costs as of tomorrow. What should you do? A. Link the acquired company's projects to your company's billing account. B. Configure the acquired company's billing account and your company's billing account to export the billing data into the same BigQuery dataset. C. Migrate the acquired company's projects into your company's GCP organization. Link the migrated projects to your company's billing account. D. Create a new GCP organization and a new billing account. Migrate the acquired company's projects and your company's projects into the new GCP organization and link the projects to the new billing account. You want to deploy an application on Cloud Run that processes messages from a Cloud Pub subtopic. You want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. 1. Create a Cloud function that uses a Cloud Pub subtrigger on that topic. 2. Call your application on Cloud Run from the Cloud function for every message. B. 1. Grant the Pub subscriber role to the service account used by Cloud Run. 2. Create a Cloud Pub subscription for that topic. 3. Make your application pull messages from that subscription. C. 1. Create a service account. 2. Give the Cloud Run invoker role to that service account for your Cloud Run application. 3. Create a Cloud Pub /sub subscription that uses that service account and uses your Cloud Run application as the push endpoint. D. 1. Deploy your application on Cloud Run on GKE with the connectivity set to internal.2. Create a Cloud Pub subscription for that topic. 3. In the same Google Kubernetes Engine cluster as your application, deploy a container that takes the messages and sends them to your application. You have an application running in Google Kubernetes Engine, GKE, with cluster autoscaling enabled. The application exposes a TCP endpoint. There are several replicas of this application. You have a Compute Engine instance in the same region, but in another virtual private cloud, VPC, called GCE Network, that has no overlapping IP ranges with the first VPC. This instance needs to connect to the application on GKE. You want to minimize effort. What should you do? You need to verify that a Google Cloud Platform service account was created at a particular time. What should you do? A. Filter the activity log to view the configuration category. Filter the resource type to service account. B. Filter the activity log to view the configuration category. Filter the resource type to Google Project. C. Filter the activity log to view the data access category. Filter the resource type to service account. D. Filter the activity log to view the data access category. Filter the resource type to Google Project. You have a large 5 terabyte AVRO file stored in a cloud storage bucket. Your analysts are proficient only in SQL and need access to the data stored in this file. You want to find a cost-effective way to complete their request as soon as possible. What should you do? A. Load data in Cloud Data Store and run a SQL query against it. B. Create a BigQuery table and load data in BigQuery. Run a SQL query on this table and drop this table after you complete your request. C. Create external tables in BigQuery that point to cloud storage buckets and run a SQL query on these external tables to complete your request. D. Create a Hadoop cluster and copy the AVRO file to DFS by compressing it. Load the file in a Hive table and provide access to your analysts so that they can run SQL queries. You are the organization and billing administrator for your company. The engineering team has the project creator role on the organization. You do not want the engineering team to be able to link projects to the billing account. Only the finance team should be able to link a project to a billing account, but they should not be able to make any other changes to projects. What should you do? A. Assign the finance team only the billing account user role on the billing account. B. Assign the engineering team only the billing account user role on the billing account. C. Assign the finance team the billing account user role on the billing account and the project billing manager role on the organization. D. Assign the engineering team the billing account user role on the billing account and the project billing manager role on the organization. You want to set up a Google Kubernetes Engine cluster. Verifiable node identity and integrity are required for the cluster, and nodes cannot be accessed from the internet. You want to reduce the operational cost of managing your cluster, and you want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. Deploy a private autopilot cluster. B. Deploy a public autopilot cluster. C. Deploy a standard public cluster and enable shielded nodes. D. Deploy a standard private cluster and enable shielded nodes. You are deploying an application to a compute engine VM in a managed instance group. The application must be running at all times, but only a single instance of the VM should run per GCP project. How should you configure the instance group? A. Set autoscaling to on, set the minimum number of instances to 1, and then set the maximum number of instances to 1. B. Set autoscaling to off, set the minimum number of instances to 1, and then set the maximum number of instances to 1. C. Set autoscaling to on, set the minimum number of instances to 1, and then set the maximum number of instances to 2. D. Set autoscaling to off, set the minimum number of instances to 1, and then set the maximum number of instances to 2. You deployed an LDAP server on Compute Engine that is reachable via TLS through port 636 using UDP. You want to make sure it is reachable by clients over that port. What should you do? A. Add the network tag allow UDP 636 to the VM instance running the LDAP server. B. Create a route called allow UDP 636 and set the next hop to be the VM instance running the LDAP server. C. Add a network tag of your choice to the instance. Create a firewall rule to allow ingress on UDP port 636 for that network tag. D. Add a network tag of your choice to the instance running the LDAP server. Create a firewall rule to allow egress on UDP port 636 for that network tag. Several employees at your company have been creating projects with Cloud Platform and paying for it with their personal credit cards, which the company reimburses. The company wants to centralize all these projects under a single new billing account. What should you do? A. Contact email@example.com with your bank account details and request a corporate billing account for your company. B. Create a ticket with Google support and wait for their call to share your credit card details over the phone. C. In the Google Platform console, go to the Resource Manage and move all projects to the root organizarian. D. In the Google Cloud Platform console, create a new billing account and set up a payment method. You are managing several Google Cloud Platform (GCP) projects and need access to all logs for the past 60 days. You want to be able to explore and quickly analyze the log contents. You want to follow Google recommended practices to obtain the combined logs for all projects. What should you do? A. Navigate to Stackdriver Logging and select Resource. Navigate to Stackdriver Log. B. Create a Stackdriver logging export with a sync destination to a BigQuery dataset. Configure the table expiration to 60 days. C. Create a Stackdriver logging export with a sync destination to cloud storage. Create a lifecycle rule to delete objects after 60 days. D. Configure a cloud scheduler job to read from Stackdriver and store the logs in BigQuery. Configure the table expiration to 60 days. You just installed the Google Cloud CLI on your new corporate laptop. You need to list the existing instances of your company on Google Cloud. What must you do before you run the GADKey Cloud Compute Instances List command? Choose to A. Run grecloud auth login. Enter your login credentials in the dialog window and paste the received login token to GCloud CLI. B. Create a Google Cloud Service account and download the service account key. Place the key file in a folder on your machine where GCloud CLI can find it. C. Download your Cloud Identity User Account key. Place the key file in a folder on your machine where GCloud CLI can find it. D. Run gcloud config set compute zone $my_zone to set the default zone for GCloud CLI. E. Run gcloud config set project $my_project to set the default project for GCloud CLI. The core business of your company is to rent out construction equipment at large scale. All the equipment that is being rented out has been equipped with multiple sensors that send event information every few seconds. These signals can vary from engine status, distance traveled, fuel level, and more. Customers are billed based on the consumption monitored by these sensors. You expect high throughput, up to thousands of events per hour per device, and need to retrieve consistent data based on the time of the event. Storing and retrieving individual signals should be atomic. What should you do? A. Create files in cloud storage as data comes in. B. Create a file and file store per device and append new data to that file. C. Ingest the data into Cloud SQL. Use multiple read replicas to match the throughput. D. Ingest the data into Bigtable. Create a row key based on the event timestamp. Your customer wants you to create a secure website with auto-scaling based on the compute instance CPU load. You want to enhance performance by storing static content in cloud storage. Which resources are needed to distribute the user traffic? A. An external HTTPS load balancer with a managed SSL certificate to distribute the load and a URL map to target the requests for the static content to the cloud storage backend. B. An external network load balancer pointing to the backend instances to distribute the load evenly. The web servers will forward the request to the cloud storage as needed. C. An internal HTTPS load balancer together with identity-aware proxy to allow only HTTPS traffic. A. An external HTTPS load balancer to distribute the load and a URL map to target the requests for the static content to the cloud storage backend. Install the HTTPS certificates on the instance. You need to migrate invoice documents stored on-premises to cloud storage. The documents have the following storage requirements. Documents must be kept for 5 years. Up to 5 revisions of the same invoice document must be stored to allow for corrections. Documents older than 365 days should be moved to lower-cost storage tiers. You want to follow Google recommended practices to minimize your operational and development costs. What should you do? A. Enable retention policies on the bucket and use Cloud Scheduler to invoke a cloud function to move or delete your documents based on their metadata. B. Enable retention policies on the bucket. Use lifecycle rules to change the storage classes of the objects, set the number of versions, and delete old files. C. Enable object versioning on the bucket and use Cloud Scheduler to invoke a Cloud Functions instance to move or delete your documents based on their metadata. B. Enable object versioning on the bucket. Use lifecycle conditions to change the storage class of the objects, set the number of versions, and delete old files. You need to extract text from audio files by using the Speech-to-Text API. The audio files are pushed to a cloud storage bucket. You need to implement a fully managed, serverless compute solution that requires authentication and aligns with Google recommended practices. You want to automate the call to the API by submitting each file to the API as the audio file arrives in the bucket. What should you do? A. Create an App Engine standard environment triggered by Cloud Storage Bucket events to submit the file URI to the Google Speech-to-Text API. B. Run a Kubernetes job to scan the bucket regularly for incoming files and call the Speech-to-Text API for each unprocessed file. C. Run a Python script by using a Linux cron job in Compute Engine to scan the bucket regularly for incoming files and call the Speech-to-Text API for each unprocessed file. D. Create a Cloud function triggered by Cloud Storage Bucket events to submit the file URI to the Google Speech-to-Text API. You are running multiple microservices in a Kubernetes engine cluster. One microservice is rendering images. The microservice responsible for the image rendering requires a large amount of CPU time compared to the memory it requires. The other microservices are workloads that are optimized for N2 standard machine types. You need to optimize your cluster so that all workloads are using resources as efficiently as possible. What should you do? A. Assign the pods of the image rendering microservice a higher pod priority than the other microservices. B. Create a node pool with compute-optimized machine type nodes for the image rendering microservice. Use the node pool with general-purpose machine type nodes for the other microservices. C. Use the node pool with general-purpose machine type nodes for the image rendering microservice. Create a node pool with compute-optimized machine type nodes for the other microservices. D. Configure the required amount of CPU and memory in the resource request specification of the image rendering microservice deployment. Keep the resource requests for the other microservices at the default. A team of data scientists infrequently needs to use a Google Kubernetes Engine (GKE) cluster that you manage. They require GPUs for some long-running, non-restartable jobs. You want to minimize cost. What should you do? A. Enable node auto-provisioning on the GKE cluster. B. Create a vertical pod autoscaler for those workloads. C. Create a node pool with preemptible VMs and GPUs attached to those VMs. D. Create a node pool of instances with GPUs and enable auto-scaling on this node pool with a minimum size of 1. You need to create an auto-scaling managed instance group for an HTTPS web application. You want to make sure that unhealthy VMs are recreated. What should you do? A. Create a health check on port 443 and use that when creating the managed instance group. B. Select multi-zone instead of single zone when creating the managed instance group. C. In the instance template, add the label health check. D. In the instance template, add a startup script that sends a heartbeat to the metadata server. Your auditor wants to view your organization's use of data in Google Cloud. The auditor is most interested in auditing who access data in cloud storage buckets. You need to help the auditor access the data they need. What should you do? A. Turn on data access logs for the buckets they want to audit, and then build a query in the log viewer that filters on cloud storage. B. Assign the appropriate permissions, and then create a Data Studio report on admin activity audit logs. C. Assign the appropriate permissions, and then use cloud monitoring to review metrics. D. Use the Export Logs API to provide the admin activity audit logs in the format they want. You built an application on your development laptop that uses Google Cloud Services. Your application uses application default credentials for authentication and works fine on your development laptop. You want to migrate this application to a Compute Engine Virtual Machine, VM, and set up authentication using Google recommended practices and minimal changes. What should you do? A. Assign appropriate access for Google services to the service account used by the Compute Engine VM. B. Create a service account with appropriate access for Google services and configure the application to use this account. C. Store credentials for service accounts with appropriate access for Google services in a config file and deploy this config file with your application. D. Store credentials for your user account with appropriate access for Google services in a config file and deploy this config file with your application. You manage an App Engine service that aggregates and visualizes data from BigQuery. The application is deployed with the default App Engine service account. The data that needs to be visualized resides in a different project managed by another team. You do not have access to this project, but you want your application to be able to read data from the BigQuery dataset. What should you do? A. Ask the other team to grant your default App Engine service account the role of BigQuery job user. B. Ask the other team to grant your default App Engine service account the role of BigQuery data viewer. C. In Cloud IAM of your project, ensure that the default App Engine service account has the role of BigQuery data viewer. D. In Cloud IAM of your project, grant a newly created service account from the other team the role of BigQuery job user in your project. You created a Google Cloud Platform project with an App Engine application inside the project. You initially configured the application to be served from the US Central region. Now you want the application to be served from the Asia Northeast 1 region. What should you do? A. Change the default region property setting in the existing GCP project to Asia Northeast 1. B. Change the region property setting in the existing App Engine application from US Central to Asia Northeast 1. C. Create a second App Engine application in the existing GCP project and specify Asia Northeast 1 as the region to serve your application. D. Create a new GCP project and create an App Engine application inside this new project. Specify Asia Northeast 1 as the region to serve your application. You need to produce a list of the enabled Google Cloud Platform APIs for a GCP project using the Google Cloud command line in the Cloud Shell. The project name is My Project. What should you do? A. Run Google Cloud Projects list to get the project ID, and then run Cloud Services list, project. B. Run Google Cloud init to set the current project to My Project, and then run Google Cloud Services list, available. C. Run Google Cloud info to view the account value, and then run Cloud Services list, account. D. Run Google Cloud Projects described to verify the project value, and then run Google Cloud Services list, available. You need to configure optimal data storage for files stored in cloud storage for minimal cost. The files are used in a mission-critical analytics pipeline that is used continually. The users are in Boston, Massachusetts, United States. What should you do? A. Configure regional storage for the region closest to the users. Configure a nearline storage class. B. Configure regional storage for the region closest to the users. Configure a standard storage class. C. Configure dual regional storage for the dual region closest to the users. Configure a nearline storage class. D. Configure dual regional storage for the dual region closest to the users. Configure a standard storage class. You have a workload running on Compute Engine that is critical to your business. You want to ensure that the data on the boot disk of this workload is backed up regularly. You need to be able to restore a backup as quickly as possible in case of disaster. You also want older backups to be cleaned automatically to save on cost. You want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. Create a cloud function to create an instance template. B. Create a snapshot schedule for the disk using the desired interval. C. Create a cron job to create a new disk from the disk using GCloud. D. Create a cloud task to create an image and export it to cloud storage. Your management has asked an external auditor to review all the resources in a specific project. The security team has enabled the organization policy called Domain Restricted Sharing on the organization node by specifying only your cloud identity domain. You want the auditor to only be able to view, but not modify, the resources in that project. What should you do? A. Ask the auditor for their Google account and give them the viewer role on the project. B. Ask the auditor for their Google account and give them the security reviewer role on the project. C. Create a temporary account for the auditor in Cloud Identity and give that account the viewer role on the project. D. Create a temporary account for the auditor in Cloud Identity and give that account the security reviewer role on the project. Your company uses a large number of Google Cloud services centralized in a single project. All teams have specific projects for testing and development. The DevOps team needs access to all of the production services in order to perform their job. You want to prevent Google Cloud product changes from broadening their permissions in the future. You want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. Grant all members of the DevOps team the role of project editor on the organization level. B. Grant all members of the DevOps team the role of project editor on the production project. C. Create a custom role that combines the required permissions. Grant the DevOps team the custom role on the production project. D. Create a custom role that combines the required permissions. Grant the DevOps team the custom role on the organization level. You need to create a compute engine instance in a new project that doesn't exist yet. What should you do? A. Using the Cloud SDK, create a new project, enable the Compute Engine API in that project, and then create the instance specifying your new project. B. Enable the Compute Engine API in the Cloud Console. Use the Cloud SDK to create the instance, and then use the project flag to specify a new project. C. Using the Cloud SDK, create the new instance, and use the project flag to specify the new project. Answer yes when prompted by Cloud SDK to enable the Compute Engine API. D. Enable the Compute Engine API in the Cloud Console. Go to the Compute Engine section of the console to create a new instance, and look for the Create in a New Project option in the creation form. You are configuring service accounts for an application that spans multiple projects. Virtual machines, VMs, running in the Web Applications project need access to BigQuery datasets in CRM databases proj. You want to follow Google recommended practices to give access to the service account in the Web Applications project. What should you do? A. Give a URL project owner URL for Web Applications appropriate roles to CRM databases proj. B. Give a URL project owner a URL role to CRM databases proj and the Web Applications project. C. Give a URL project owner a URL role to CRM databases proj and BigQuery data viewer role to Web Applications. D. Give BigQuery data viewer role to CRM databases proj and appropriate roles to Web Applications. Your company is using Google Workspace to manage employee accounts. Anticipated growth will increase the number of personnel from 100 employees to 1,000 employees within 2 years. Most employees will need access to your company's Google Cloud account. The systems and processes will need to support 10x growth without performance degradation, unnecessary complexity, or security issues. What should you do? A. Migrate the users to Active Directory. Connect the human resources system to Active Directory. Turn on Google Cloud Directory Sync (GCDS) for cloud identity. Turn on Identity Federation from Cloud Identity to Active Directory. B. Organize the users in Cloud Identity into groups. Enforce multi-factor authentication in Cloud Identity. C. Turn on Identity Federation between Cloud Identity and Google Workspace. Enforce multi-factor authentication for domain-wide delegation. D. Use a third-party identity provider service through federation. Synchronize the users from Google Workspace to the third-party provider in real time. Your company is running a 3-tier web application on virtual machines that use a MySQL database. You need to create an estimated total cost of cloud infrastructure to run this application on Google Cloud instances and Cloud SQL. What should you do? A. Create a Google spreadsheet with multiple Google Cloud resource combinations. On a separate sheet, import the current Google Cloud prices and use these prices for the calculations within formulas. B. Use the Google Cloud Pricing Calculator and select the Cloud Operations template to define your web application with as much detail as possible. C. Implement a similar architecture on Google Cloud and run a reasonable load test on a smaller scale. Check the billing information and calculate the estimated costs based on the real load your system usually handles. D. Use the Google Cloud Pricing Calculator to determine the cost of every Google Cloud resource you expect to use. Use similar size instances for the web server, and use your current on-premises machines as a comparison for Cloud SQL. You are monitoring an application and receive user feedback that a specific error is spiking. You notice that the error is caused by a service account having insufficient permissions. You are able to solve the problem, but want to be notified if the problem recurs. What should you do? A. In the log viewer, filter the logs on severity error and the name of the service account. B. Create a sync to BigQuery to export all the logs. Create a Data Studio dashboard on the exported logs. C. Create a custom log-based metric for the specific error to be used in an alerting policy. D. Grant project owner access to the service account. You are building a back-end service for an e-commerce platform that will persist transaction data from mobile and web clients. After the platform is launched, you expect a large volume of global transactions. Your business team wants to run SQL queries to analyze the data. You need to build a highly available and scalable data store for the platform. What should you do? A. Create a multi-region Cloud Spanner instance with an optimized schema. B. Create a multi-region Firestore database with aggregation query enabled. C. Create a multi-region Cloud SQL for PostgreSQL database with optimized indexes. D. Create a multi-region BigQuery dataset with optimized tables. Your Dataproc cluster runs in a single virtual private cloud (VPC) network in a single subnetwork with range 172.16.20.128/25. There are no private IP addresses available in the subnetwork. You want to add new VMs to communicate with your cluster using the minimum number of steps. What should you do? A. Modify the existing subnet range to 172.16.20.0/24. B. Create a new secondary IP range in the VPC and configure the VMs to use that range. C. Create a new VPC network for the VMs. Enable VPC peering between the VM's VPC network and the Dataproc cluster VPC network. D. Create a new VPC network for the VMs with a subnet of 172.32.0.0/16. Enable VPC network peering between the Dataproc VPC network and the VM's VPC network. Configure a custom root exchange. Your manager asks you to deploy a workload to a Kubernetes cluster. You are not sure of the workload's resource requirements or how the requirements might vary depending on usage patterns, external dependencies, or other factors. You need a solution that makes cost-effective recommendations regarding CPU and memory requirements and allows the workload to function consistently in any situation. You want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. Configure the horizontal pod autoscaler for availability and configure the cluster autoscaler for suggestions. B. Configure the horizontal pod autoscaler for availability and configure the vertical pod autoscaler recommendations for suggestions. C. Configure the vertical pod autoscaler recommendations for availability, and configure the cluster autoscaler for suggestions. D. Configure the vertical pod autoscaler recommendations for availability, and configure the horizontal pod autoscaler for suggestions. You want to enable your development team to deploy new features to an existing Cloud Run service in production. To minimize the risk associated with a new revision, you want to reduce the number of customers who might be affected by an outage without introducing any development or operational costs to your customers. You want to follow Google recommended practices for managing revisions to a service. What should you do? A. Ask your customers to retry access to your service with exponential backoff to mitigate any potential problems after the new revision is deployed. B. Gradually roll out the new revision and split customer traffic between the revisions to allow rollback in case a problem occurs. C. Send all customer traffic to the new revision and roll back to a previous revision if you witness any problems in production. D. Deploy your application to a second Cloud Run service and ask your customers to use the second Cloud Run service. Your company's security vulnerability management policy wants a member of the security team to have visibility into vulnerabilities and other OS metadata for a specific compute engine instance. This compute engine instance hosts a critical application in your Google Cloud project. You need to implement your company's security vulnerability management policy. What should you do? A. Ensure that the Ops agent is installed on the compute engine instance. Create a custom metric in the Cloud Monitoring dashboard. Provide the security team member with access to this dashboard. B. Ensure that the Ops agent is installed on the compute engine instance. Provide the security team member roles /osconfig inventory viewer permission. C. Ensure that the OS config agent is installed on the compute engine instance. Provide the security team member roles /osconfig vulnerability report viewer permission. D. Ensure that the OS config agent is installed on the compute engine instance. Create a log sync to BigQuery dataset. Provide the security team member with access to this dataset. You need to deploy an application in Google Cloud using serverless technology. You want to test a new version of the application with a small percentage of production traffic. What should you do? A. Deploy the application to Cloud Run. Use gradual rollouts for traffic splitting. B. Deploy the application to Google Kubernetes Engine. Use Anthos Service Mesh for traffic splitting. C. Deploy the application to Cloud Functions. Specify the version number in the function's name. D. Deploy the application to App Engine. For each new version, create a new service. Your company developed an application to deploy on Google Kubernetes Engine. Certain parts of the application are not fault-tolerant and are allowed to have downtime. Other parts of the application are critical and must always be available. You need to configure a Google Kubernetes Engine cluster while optimizing for cost. What should you do? A. Create a cluster with a single node pool by using standard VMs. Label HE fault-tolerant deployments as spot_true. B. Create a cluster with a single node pool by using spot VMs. Label the critical deployments as spot_false. C. Create a cluster with both a spot VM node pool and a node pool by using standard VMs. Deploy the critical deployments on the spot VM node pool and the fault-tolerant deployments on the node pool by using standard VMs. D. Create a cluster with both a spot VM node pool and a nodes pool by using standard VMs. Deploy the critical deployments on the node pool by using standard VMs and the fault-tolerant deployments on the Spot VM node pool. You installed the Google Cloud CLI on your workstation and set the proxy configuration. However, you are worried that your proxy credentials will be recorded in the Google Cloud CLI logs. You want to prevent your proxy credential from being logged. What should you do? A. Configure username and password by using GCloud config set proxy, username, and GCloud config set proxy password commands. B. Encode username and password in SHA-256 encoding and save to a text file. Use filename as a value in the GCloud config set core/custom_ca_certs_file command. C. Provide values for cloudSDK_paroxy_username and cloudSDK_paroxy_password in the GCloud CLI tool configuration file. A. Set the cloudSDK_proxy_username and cloudSDK_proxy_password properties by using environment variables in your command line tool. Your company is moving its continuous integration and delivery (CI/CD) pipeline to compute engine instances. The pipeline will manage the entire cloud infrastructure through code. How can you ensure that the pipeline has appropriate permissions while your system is following security best practices? A. Attach a single service account to the compute instances. Add minimal rights to the service account. Allow the service account to impersonate a cloud identity user with elevated permissions to create, update, or delete resources. B. Add a step for human approval to the CI/CD pipeline before the execution of the infrastructure provisioning. Use the Human Approvals IAM account for the provisioning. C. Attach a single service account to the compute instances. Add all required identity and access management IAM permissions to this service account to create, update, or delete resources. D. Create multiple service accounts, one for each pipeline with the appropriate minimal identity and access management IAM permissions. Use a secret manager service to store the key files of the service accounts. Allow the CI/CD pipeline to request the appropriate secrets during the execution of the pipeline. You are responsible for a web application on Compute Engine. You want your support team to be notified automatically if users experience high latency for at least 5 minutes. You need a Google recommended solution with no development cost. What should you do? A. Export cloud monitoring metrics to BigQuery and use a Looker Studio dashboard to monitor your web application's latency. B. Create an alert policy to send a notification when the HTTP response latency exceeds the specified threshold. C. Implement an App Engine service which invokes the Cloud Monitoring API and sends a notification in case of anomalies. D. Use the Cloud Monitoring dashboard to observe latency and take the necessary actions when the response latency exceeds the specified threshold. You are migrating a business-critical application from your local data center into Google Cloud. As part of your high availability strategy, you want to ensure that any data used by the application will be immediately available if a zonal failure occurs. What should you do? A. Store the application data on a zonal persistent disk. Create a snapshot schedule for the disk. If an outage occurs, create a new disk from the most recent snapshot and attach it to a new VM in another zone. B. Store the application data on a zonal persistent disk. If an outage occurs, Create an instance in another zone with this disk attached. C. Store the application data on a regional persistent disk. Create a snapshot schedule for the disk. If an outage occurs, create a new disk from the most recent snapshot and attach it to a new VM in another zone. D. Store the application data on a regional persistent disk. If an outage occurs, create an instance in another zone with this disk attached. You created several resources in multiple Google Cloud projects. All projects are linked to different billing accounts. To better estimate future charges, you want to have a single visual representation of all costs incurred. You want to include new cost data as soon as possible. What should you do? A. Fill all resources in the pricing calculator to get an estimate of the monthly cost. B. Use the reports view in the Cloud Billing Console to view the desired cost information. C. Visit the cost table page to get a CSV export and visualize it using Looker Studio. D. Configure billing data export to BigQuery and visualize the data in Looker Studio. You are working for a hospital that stores its medical images in an on-premises data room. The hospital wants to use cloud storage for archival storage of these images. The hospital wants an automated process to upload any new medical images to cloud storage. You need to design and implement a solution. What should you do? A. Create a pub subtopic and enable a cloud storage trigger for the pub subtopic. Create an application that sends all medical images to the pub subtopic. B. Create a script that uses the Gray Cloud Storage command to synchronize the on-premises storage with cloud storage. Schedule the script as a cron job. C. Create a pub subtopic and create a cloud function connected to the topic that writes data to cloud storage. Create an application that sends all medical images to the pub subtopic. D. In the Google Cloud Console, go to Cloud Storage. Upload the relevant images to the appropriate bucket. Your company requires all developers to have the same permissions, regardless of the Google Cloud project they are working on. Your company's security policy also restricts developer permissions to Compute Engine, Cloud Functions, and Cloud SQL. You want to implement the security policy with minimal effort. What should you do? A. Create a custom role with Compute Engine, Cloud Functions, and Cloud SQL permissions in one project within the Google Cloud organization. Copy the role across all projects created within the organization with the GCloud IAM roles copy command. Assign the role to developers in those projects. B. Add all developers to a Google group in Google Groups for Workspace. Assign the predefined role of Compute Admin to the Google group at the Google Cloud organization level. C. Add all developers to a Google group in Cloud Identity. Assign predefined roles for Compute Engine, Cloud Functions, and Cloud SQL permissions to the Google group for each project in the Google Cloud organization. D. Add all developers to a Google group in Cloud Identity. Create a custom role with Compute Engine, Cloud Functions, and Cloud SQL permissions at the Google Cloud organization level. Assign the custom role to the Google group. You are configuring Cloud DNS. You want to create DNS records to point home.mydomain.com, mydomain.com, and www.mydomain.com to the IP address of your Google Cloud Load Balancer. What should you do? A. Create one CNAME record to point mydomain.com to the load balancer, and create two A records to point www and home to mydomain.com respectively. B. Create one CNAME record to point mydomain.com to the load balancer, and create 2 quadruple A records to point www and home to mydomain.com respectively. C. Create 1 A record to point mydomain.com to the load balancer, and create 2 CNAME records to point www and home to mydomain.com respectively. B. Create 1 A record to point mydomain.com to the load balancer, and create 2 NS records to point www and home to mydomain.com respectively. Your company has multiple projects linked to a single billing account in Google Cloud. You need to visualize the costs with specific metrics that should be dynamically calculated based on company-specific criteria. You want to automate the process. What should you do? A. In the Google Cloud Console, visualize the costs related to the projects in the Reports section. B. In the Google Cloud Console, visualize the costs related to the projects in the Cost Breakdown section. C. In the Google Cloud Console, use the export functionality of the cost table. Create a Looker Studio dashboard on top of the CSV export. D. Configure Cloud Billing Data Export to BigQuery for the billing account. Create a Looker Studio dashboard on top of the BigQuery export. You are building a multiplayer gaming application that will store game information in a database. As the popularity of the application increases, you are concerned about delivering consistent performance. You need to ensure an optimal gaming performance for global users without increasing the management complexity. What should you do? A. Use Cloud SQL database with cross-region replication to store game statistics in the EU, US, and APAC regions. B. Use Cloud Spanner to store user data mapped to the game statistics. C. Use BigQuery to store game statistics with a Redis on memory store instance in the front to provide global consistency. D. Store game statistics in a Bigtable database, partitioned by username. You deployed an application on a managed instance group in Compute Engine. The application accepts Transmission Control Protocol (TCP) traffic on port 389 and requires you to preserve the IP address of the client who is making a request. You want to expose the application to the Internet by using a load balancer. What should you do? A. Expose the application by using an external TCP network load balancer. B. Expose the application by using a TCP proxy load balancer. C. Expose the application by using an SSL proxy load balancer. D. Expose the application by using an internal TCP network load balancer. Your company has developed a new application that consists of multiple microservices. You want to deploy the application to Google Kubernetes Engine, GKE, and you want to ensure that the cluster can scale as more applications are deployed in the future. You want to avoid manual intervention when each new application is deployed. What should you do? A. Deploy the application on GKE and add a horizontal pod autoscaler to the deployment. B. Deploy the application on GKE and add a vertical pod autoscaler to the deployment. C. Create a GKE cluster with autoscaling enabled on the node pool. Set a minimum and maximum for the size of the node pool. D. Create a separate node pool for each application and deploy each application to its dedicated node pool. You have created a new project in Google Cloud through the Google Cloud Command Line Interface, CLI, and linked a billing account. You need to create a new Compute Engine instance using the CLI. You need to perform the prerequisite steps. What should you do? A. Create a cloud monitoring workspace. B. Create a VPC network in the project. C. Enable the Compute Googleepus.com API. D. Grant yourself the IAM role of computer admin. You have an on-premises data analytics set of binaries that processes data files in memory for about 45 minutes every midnight. The sizes of those data files range from 1 gigabyte to 16 gigabytes. You want to migrate this application to Google Cloud with minimal effort and cost. What should you do? A. Create a container for the set of binaries. Use Cloud Scheduler to start a Cloud Run job for the container. B. Create a container for the set of binaries. Deploy the container to Google Kubernetes Engine, GKE, and use the Kubernetes Scheduler to start the application. C. Upload the code to Cloud Functions. Use Cloud Scheduler to start the application. D. Lift and shift to a VM on Compute Engine. Use an instance schedule to start and stop the instance. You are running a data warehouse on BigQuery. A partner company is offering a recommendation engine based on the data in your data warehouse. The partner company is also running their application on Google Cloud. They manage the resources in their own project, but they need access to the BigQuery dataset in your project. You want to provide the partner company with access to the dataset. What should you do? A. Create a service account in your own project and grant this service account access to BigQuery in your project. B. Create a service account in your own project and ask the partner to grant this service account access to BigQuery in their project. C. Ask the partner to create a service account in their project and have them give the service account access to BigQuery in their project. D. Ask the partner to create a service account in their project and grant their service account access to the BigQuery dataset in your project. You need to set up a policy so that videos stored in a specific cloud storage regional bucket are moved to Coldline after 90 days and then deleted after 1 year from their creation. How should you set up the policy? A. Use Cloud Storage Object Lifecycle Management using age conditions with set storage class and delete actions. Set the set storage class action to 90 days and the delete action to 275 days. 365 euro 90B. Use Cloud Storage Object conditions using age conditions with set storage class and delete actions. Set the set storage class action to 90 days and the delete action to 365 days. C. Use gsutil rewrite and set the delete action to 275 days, 365 to 90. D. Use gsutil rewrite and set the delete action to 365 days. You create a deployment with 2 replicas in a Google Kubernetes Engine cluster that has a single preemptible node pool. After a few minutes, you use kubectl to examine the status of your pod and observe that one of them is still in pending status. What is the most likely cause? A. The pending pod's resource requests are too large to fit on a single node of the cluster. B. Too many pods are already running in the cluster, and there are not enough resources left to schedule the pending pod. C. The node pool is configured with a service account that does not have permission to pull the container image used by the pending pod. D. The pending pod was originally scheduled on a node that has been preempted between the creation of the deployment and your verification of the pod status. It is currently being rescheduled on a new node. Your company has an internal application for managing transactional orders. The application is used exclusively by employees in a single physical location. The application requires strong consistency, fast queries, and ACID guarantees for multi-table transactional updates. The first version of the application is implemented in PostgreSQL, and you want to deploy it to the cloud with minimal code changes. Which database is most appropriate for this application? A. Bigtable. B. BigQuery. C. Cloud SQL. D. Firestore. You are storing sensitive information in a cloud storage bucket. For legal reasons, you need to be able to record all requests that read any of the stored data. You want to make sure you comply with these requirements. What should you do? A. Enable the Identity-Aware Proxy API on the project. B. Scan the bucket using the Data Loss Prevention API. C. Allow only a single service account access to read the data. D. Enable data access audit logs for the Cloud Storage API. Your team is using Linux instances on Google Cloud. You need to ensure that your team logs in to these instances in the most secure and cost-efficient way. What should you do? A. Attach a public IP to the instances and allow incoming connections from the Internet on port 22 for SSH. B. Use the gcloud compute SSH command with the tunnel-through IAP flag. Allow ingress traffic from the IP range 35.235.240.0/20 on port 22. C. Use a third-party tool to provide remote access to the instances. D. Create a Bastion host with public Internet access. Create the SSH tunnel to the instance through the Bastion host. An application generates daily reports in a compute engine virtual machine, VM. The VM is in the project Corp IoT Insights. Your team operates only in the project Corp aggregate reports and needs a copy of the daily exports in the bucket Corp aggregate reports storage. You want to configure access so that the daily reports from the VM are available in the bucket Corp aggregate reports storage, and use as few steps as possible while following Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. Move both projects under the same folder. B. Grant the VM service account the role Storage Object Creator on Corp Aggregate Reports Storage. C. Create a shared VPC network between both projects. Grant the VM service account the role Storage Object Creator on Corp IoT Insights. D. Make Corp Aggregate Report Storage public and create a folder with a pseudo-randomized suffix name. Share the folder with the IoT team. You are setting up a Windows VM on Compute Engine and want to make sure you can log in to the VM via RDP. What should you do? A. After the VM has been created, use your Google account credentials to log in into the VM. B. After the VM has been created, use gcloud compute reset Windows password to retrieve the login credentials for the VM. C. When creating the VM, add metadata to the instance using Windows password as the key and a password as the value. D. After the VM has been created, download the JSON private key for the default Compute Engine service account. Use the credentials in the JSON file to log in to the VM. Your company uses cloud storage to store application backup files for disaster recovery purposes. You want to follow Google's recommended practices. Which storage option should you use? A. Multi-regional storage. B. Regional storage. C. Nearline storage. D. Cold line storage. You have deployed an application on a single compute engine instance. The application writes logs to disk. Users start reporting errors with the application. You want to diagnose the problem. What should you do? A. Navigate to cloud logging and view the application logs. B. Connect to the instance's serial console and read the application logs. C. Configure a health check on the instance and set a low healthy threshold value. D. Install and configure the cloud logging agent and view the logs from cloud logging. You are planning to migrate your on-premises data to Google Cloud. The data includes 200 terabytes of video files in SAN storage, data warehouse data stored on Amazon Redshift, 20 gigabytes of PNG files stored on an S3 bucket. You need to load the video files into a cloud storage bucket, transfer the data warehouse data into BigQuery, and load the PNG files into a second cloud storage bucket. You want to follow Google recommended practices and avoid writing any code for the migration. What should you do? A. Use G-Cloud storage for the video files, Dataflow for the data warehouse data, and Storage Transfer Service for the PNG files. B. Use Transfer Appliance for the videos, BigQuery Data Transfer Service for the data warehouse data, and Storage Transfer Service for the PNG files. C. Use Storage Transfer Service for the video files, BigQuery Data Transfer Service for the data warehouse data, and Storage Transfer Service for the PNG files. D. Use Cloud Data Fusion for the video files, Dataflow for the data warehouse data, and Storage Transfer Service for the PNG files. After a recent security incident, your startup company wants better insight into what is happening in the Google Cloud environment. You need to monitor unexpected firewall changes and instance creation. Your company prefers simple solutions. What should you do? A. Create a log sync to forward cloud audit logs filtered for firewalls and compute instances to cloud storage. Use BigQuery to periodically analyze log events in the storage bucket. B. Use cloud logging filters to create log-based metrics for firewall and instance actions. Monitor the changes and set up reasonable alerts. C. Install Kibana on a compute instance. Create a log sync to forward cloud audit logs filtered for firewalls and compute instances to pub/sub. Target the pub/sub topic to push messages to the Kibana instance. Analyze the logs on Kibana in real time. D. Turn on Google Cloud Firewall Rules logging and set up alerts for any insert, update, or delete events. Your organization has 3 existing Google Cloud projects. You need to bill the marketing department for only their Google Cloud services for a new initiative within their group. What should you do? A. 1. Verify that you are assigned the Billing Administrator IAM role for your organization's Google Cloud project for the marketing department. 2. Link the new project to a marketing billing account. B. 1. Verify that you are assigned the Billing Administrator IAM role for your organization's Google Cloud account. 2. Create a new Google Cloud project for the marketing department. 3. Set the default key value project labels to department marketing for all services in this project. C. 1. Verify that you are assigned the Organization Administrator IAM role for your organization's Google Cloud account. 2. Create a new Google Cloud project for the marketing department. 3. Link the new project to a marketing billing account. D. 1. Verify that you are assigned the Organization Administrator IAM role for your organization's Google Cloud account. 2. Create a new Google Cloud project for the marketing department. 3. Set the default key value project labels to department marketing for all services in this project. You have designed a solution on Google Cloud that uses multiple Google Cloud products. Your company has asked you to estimate the costs of the solution. You need to provide estimates for the monthly total cost. What should you do? A. For each Google Cloud product in the solution, review the pricing details on the product's pricing page. Use the pricing calculator to total the monthly costs for each Google Cloud product. B. For each Google Cloud product in the solution, review the pricing details on the product's pricing page. Create a Google Sheet that summarizes the expected monthly costs for each product. C. Provision the solution on Google Cloud. Leave the solution provisioned for 1 week. Navigate to the billing report page in the Cloud Console. Multiply the 1-week cost to determine the monthly costs. D. Provision the solution on Google Cloud. Leave the solution provisioned for 1 week. Use cloud monitoring to determine the provisioned and used resource amounts. Multiply the 1-week cost to determine the monthly costs. You want to select and configure a cost-effective solution for relational data on Google Cloud Platform. You are working with a small set of operational data in one geographic location. You need to support point-in-time recovery. What should you do? A. Select Cloud SQL, MySQL. Verify that the Enable Binary Logging option is selected. B. Select Cloud SQL, MySQL. Select the Create Failover Replicas option. C. Select Cloud Spanner. Set up your instance with 2 nodes. D. Select Cloud Spanner. Set up your instance as multi-regional. You have an application that receives SSL encrypted TCP traffic on port 443. Clients for this application are located all over the world. You want to minimize latency for the clients. Which load balancing option should you use? A. HTTPS Load Balancer. B. Network Load Balancer. C. SSL Proxy Load Balancer. D. Internal TCP UDP Load Balancer. Add a firewall rule allowing ingress traffic from 0.0.0.0/0 on the target instances. You are developing a new web application that will be deployed on Google Cloud Platform. As part of your release cycle, you want to test updates to your application on a small portion of real user traffic. The majority of the users should still be directed towards a stable version of your application. What should you do? A. Deploy the application on App Engine. For each update, create a new version of the same service. Configure traffic splitting to send a small percentage of traffic to the new version. B. Deploy the application on App Engine. For each update, create a new service. Configure traffic splitting to send a small percentage of traffic to the new service. C. Deploy the application on Kubernetes Engine. For a new release, update the deployment to use the new version. D. Deploy the application on Kubernetes Engine. For a new release, create a new deployment for the new version. Update the service to use the new deployment. Your company has a 3-tier solution running on Compute Engine. The configuration of the current infrastructure is shown below. Each tier has a service account that is associated with all instances within it. You need to enable communication on TCP port 8080 between tiers as follows. Asterisk instances in tier number 1 must communicate with tier number 2. Instances in tier number 2 must communicate with tier number 3. What should you do? A1. Create an ingress firewall rule with the following settings. Eurocent targets. All instances owe Eurocent source filter. IP ranges with the range set to 10.0.2.0/24. Eurocent protocols. Allow all to. Create an ingress firewall rule with the following settings. Eurocent targets. All instances owe Eurocent source filter. IP ranges with the range set to 10.0.1.0.1.0/24. Eurocent protocols. Allow all. B1. Create an ingress firewall rule with the following settings. Eurocent targets. All instances with tier number 2 service account owe Eurocent source filter. All instances with tier number 1 service account owe Eurocent protocols. Allow TCP 8082. Create an ingress firewall rule with the following settings. Eurocent targets. All instances with tier number 3 service account owe Eurocent source filter. All instances with tier number 2 service account owe Eurocent protocols. Allow TCP 8080. C1. Create an ingress firewall rule with the following settings. Eurocent targets. All instances with tier number 2 service account a Eurocent source filter. All instances with tier number 1 service account Eurocent protocols. Allow all to. Create an ingress firewall rule with the following settings. Eurocent targets. All instances with tier number 3 service account Eurocent source filter. All instances with tier number 2 service account Eurocent protocols. Allow all. D1. Create an egress firewall rule with the following settings. Eurocent targets. All instances owe Eurocent source filter. IP ranges with the range set to 10.0.2.0/24. Eurocent protocols. Allow TCP 8082. Create an egress firewall rule with the following settings. Eurocent targets. All instances Eurocent source filter. IP ranges with the range set to 10.0.1.0/24. Eurocent protocols. Allow TCP 8080. You need to create a new billing account and then link it with an existing Google Cloud Platform project. What should you do? A. Verify that you are Project Billing Manager for the GCP project. Update the existing project to link it to the existing billing account. B. Verify that you are Project Billing Manager for the GCP project. Create a new billing account and link the new billing account to the existing project. C. Verify that you are Billing Administrator for the billing account. Create a new project and link the new project to the existing billing account. D. Verify that you are Billing Administrator for the billing account. Update the existing project to link it to the existing billing account. Your application is running on Google Cloud in a Managed Instance Group, MIG. You see errors in cloud logging for one VM that one of the processes is not responsive. You want to replace this VM in the MIG quickly. What should you do? A. Use the gcloud compute instances update command with a refresh action for the VM. B. Use the gcloud compute instance groups managed recreate instances command to recreate the VM. C. Select the MIG from the Compute Engine console and, in the menu, select Replace VMs. D. Update and apply the instance template of the MIG. You have a developer laptop with the Cloud SDK installed on Ubuntu. The Cloud SDK was installed from the Google Cloud Ubuntu package repository. You want to test your application locally on your laptop with Cloud Data Store. What should you do? A. Export Cloud Data Store data using gCloud Data Store Export. B. Create a Cloud Data Store index using gCloud Data Store Indexes Create. C. Install the Google Cloud SDK Data Store Emulator component using the apt-get install command. D. Install the Cloud Data Store Emulator component using the gCloud Components install command. You have an application that uses Cloud Spanner as a database backend to keep current state information about users. Cloud Bigtable logs all events triggered by users. You export Cloud Spanner data to cloud storage during daily backups. One of your analysts asks you to join data from Cloud Spanner and Cloud Bigtable for specific users. You want to complete this ad hoc request as efficiently as possible. What should you do? A. Create a Dataflow job that copies data from Cloud Bigtable and Cloud Storage for specific users. B. Create a Dataflow job that copies data from Cloud Bigtable and Cloud Spanner for specific users. C. Create a Cloud Dataproc cluster that runs a Spark job to extract data from Cloud Bigtable and Cloud Storage for specific users. D. Create two separate BigQuery external tables on Cloud Storage and Cloud Bigtable. Use the BigQuery console to join these tables through user fields and apply appropriate filters. You have an application that uses Cloud Spanner as a back-end database. The application has a very predictable traffic pattern. You want to automatically scale up or down the number of Spanner nodes depending on traffic. What should you do? A. Create a cron job that runs on a scheduled basis to review cloud monitoring metrics, and then resize the Spanner instance accordingly. B. Create a cloud monitoring alerting policy to send an alert to on-call SRE emails when Cloud Spanner CPU exceeds the threshold. SREs would scale resources up or down accordingly. C. Create a cloud monitoring alerting policy to send an alert to Google Cloud Support email when Cloud Spanner CPU exceeds your threshold. Google Support would scale resources up or down accordingly. D. Create a cloud monitoring alerting policy to send an alert to Webhook when Cloud Spanner CPU is over or under your threshold. Create a cloud function that listens to HTTP and resizes Spanner resources accordingly. You want to configure a solution for archiving data in a cloud storage bucket. The solution must be cost-effective. Data with multiple versions should be archived after 30 days. Previous versions are accessed once a month for reporting. This archived data is also occasionally updated at month end. What should you do? A. Add a bucket lifecycle rule that archives data with newer versions after 30 days to Coldline storage. B. Add a bucket lifecycle rule that archives data with newer versions after 30 days to Nearline storage. C. Add a bucket lifecycle rule that archives data from regional storage after 30 days to Coldline storage. A. Add a bucket lifecycle rule that archives data from regional storage after 30 days to Nearline storage. Your company is moving from an on-premises environment to Google Cloud. You have multiple development teams that use Cassandra environments as back-end databases. They all need a development environment that is isolated from other Cassandra instances. You want to move to Google Cloud quickly and with minimal support effort. What should you do? A. 1. Build an instruction guide to install Cassandra on Google Cloud. 2. Make the instruction guide accessible to your developers. B. 1. Advise your developers to go to Cloud Marketplace. 2. Ask the developers to launch a Cassandra image for their development work. C. 1. Build a Cassandra Compute Engine instance and take a snapshot of it. 2. Use the snapshot to create instances for your developers. D. 1. Build a Cassandra Compute Engine instance and take a snapshot of it. 2. Upload the snapshot to cloud storage and make it accessible to your developers. 3. Build instructions to create a Compute Engine instance from the snapshot so that developers can do it themselves. Your managed instance group raised an alert stating that new instance creation has failed to create new instances. You need to maintain the number of running instances specified by the template to be able to process expected application traffic. What should you do? A. Create an instance template that contains valid syntax which will be used by the instance group. Delete any persistent disks with the same name as instance names. B. Create an instance template that contains valid syntax that will be used by the instance group. Verify that the instance name and persistent disk name values are not the same in the template. C. Verify that the instance template being used by the instance group contains valid syntax. Delete any persistent disks with the same name as instance names. Set the disks auto-delete property to true in the instance template. D. Delete the current instance template and replace it with a new instance template. Verify that the instance name and persistent disk name values are not the same in the template. Set the disks auto-delete property to true in the instance template. You are using multiple configurations for cloud. You want to review the configured Kubernetes engine cluster of an inactive configuration using the fewest possible steps. What should you do? A. Use GulaCloud config configurations describe to review the output. B. Use gcloud config configurations activate and gcloud config list to review the output. C. Use kubect lconfig get context to review the output. D. Use kubect lconfig use context and kubect lconfig view to review the output. You have a batch workload that runs every night and uses a large number of virtual machines, VMs. It is fault tolerant and can tolerate some of the VMs being terminated. The current cost of VMs is too high. What should you do? A. Run a test using simulated maintenance events. If the test is successful, use Spot N2 standard VMs when running future jobs. B. Run a test using simulated maintenance events. If the test is successful, use N2 standard VMs when running future jobs. C. Run a test using a managed instance group. If the test is successful, use N2 standard VMs in the managed instance group when running future jobs. D. Run a test using N1 standard VMs instead of N2. If the test is successful, use N1 standard VMs when running future jobs. You are given a project with a single virtual private cloud, VPC, and a single subnetwork in the US Central 1 region. There is a Compute Engine instance hosting an application in this subnetwork. You need to deploy a new instance in the same project in the Europe West 1 region. This new instance needs access to the application. You want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. 1. Create a subnetwork in the same VPC in Europe West 1. 2. Create the new instance in the new subnetwork and use the first instance's private address as the endpoint. B. 1. Create a VPC and a subnetwork in Europe West 1. 2. Expose the application with an internal load balancer. 3. Create the new instance in the new subnetwork and use the load balancer's address as the endpoint. C. 1. Create a subnetwork in the same VPC in Europe West 1. 2. Use Cloud VPN to connect the two subnetworks. 3. Create the new instance in the new subnetwork and use the first instance's private address as the endpoint. D. 1. Create a VPC and a subnetwork in Europe West 1. 2. Peer the two VPCs. 3. Create the new instance in the new subnetwork and use the first instance's private address as the endpoint. You have a web application deployed as a managed instance group. You have a new version of the application to gradually deploy. Your web application is currently receiving live web traffic. You want to ensure that the available capacity does not decrease during the deployment. What should you do? A. Perform a rolling action start update with max surge set to 0 and max unavailable set to 1. B. Perform a rolling action start update with max surge set to 1 and max unavailable set to 0. C. Create a new managed instance group with an updated instance template. Add the group to the backend service for the load balancer. When all instances in the new managed instance group are healthy, delete the old managed instance group. D. Create a new instance template with the new application version. Update the existing managed instance group with a new instance template. Delete the instances in the managed instance group to allow the managed instance group to recreate the instance using the new instance template. You received a JSON file that contained a private key of a service account in order to get access to several resources in a Google Cloud project. You downloaded and installed the Cloud SDK and want to use this private key for authentication and authorization when performing kcloud commands. What should you do? A. Use the command gascloud-auth login and point it to the private key. B. Use the command jcloud-auth activate service account and point it to the private key. C. Place the private key file in the installation directory of the Cloud SDK and rename it to Euro Credentials. JSON A Euro. A. Place the private key file in your home directory and rename it to a Euro Google _application _credentials a Euro. A colleague handed over a Google Cloud Platform project for you to maintain. As part of a security checkup, you want to review who has been granted the project owner role. What should you do? A. In the console, validate which SSH keys have been stored as project-wide keys. B. Navigate to Identity-Aware Proxy and check the permissions for these resources. C. Enable audit logs on the IAM and admin page for all resources, and validate the results. D. Use the command GoCloud Projects get a Euro IAM a Euro policy to view the current role assignments. You have downloaded and installed the GULI Cloud Command Line Interface, CLI, and have authenticated with your Google account. Most of your Compute Engine instances in your project run in the Europe West 1D zone. You want to avoid having to specify this zone with each CLI command when managing these instances. What should you do? A. Set the Europe West 1D zone as the default zone using the gcloud config subcommand. B. In the settings page for Compute Engine under default location, set the zone to Europe, a Euro West 1D. C. In the CLI installation directory, create a file called default conf containing zone equals Europe, Euro West 1, O Euro D. Create a metadata entry on the Compute Engine page with key compute, zone, and value Europe, Euro West 1, O Euro D. Your company set up a complex organizational structure on Google Cloud. The structure includes hundreds of folders and projects. Only a few team members should be able to view the hierarchical structure. You need to assign minimum permissions to these team members, and you want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. Add the users to roles/browser role. B. Add the users to roles/IAM role viewer role. C. Add the users to a group and add this group to roles/browser. D. Add the users to a group and add this group to roles/IAM role viewer role. You created an instance of SQL Server 2017 on Compute Engine to test features in the new version. You want to connect to this instance using the fewest number of steps. What should you do? A. Install a RDP client on your desktop. Verify that a firewall rule for port 3389 exists. B. Install a RDP client in your desktop. Set a Windows username and password in the GCP console. Use the credentials to log in to the instance. C. Set a Windows password in the GCP console. Verify that a firewall rule for port 22 exists. Click the RDP button in the GCP console and supply the credentials to log in. D. Set a Windows username and password in the GCP console. Verify that a firewall rule for port 3389 exists. Click the RDP button in the GCP console and supply the credentials to log in. You are analyzing Google Cloud Platform service costs from 3 separate projects. You want to use this information to create service cost estimates by service type, daily and monthly, for the next 6 months, using standard query syntax. What should you do? A. Export your bill to a cloud storage bucket, and then import into Cloud Bigtable for analysis. B. Export your bill to a cloud storage bucket, and then import into Google Sheets for analysis. C. Export your transactions to a local file and perform analysis with a desktop tool. D. Export your bill to a BigQuery dataset, and then write time window-based SQL queries for analysis. You need to monitor resources that are distributed over different projects in Google Cloud Platform. You want to consolidate reporting under the same Stackdriver monitoring dashboard. What should you do? A. Use shared VPC to connect all projects and link Stackdriver to one of the projects. B. For each project, create a Stackdriver account. In each project, create a service account for that project and grant it the role of Stackdriver account editor in all other projects. C. Configure a single Stackdriver account and link all projects to the same account. D. Configure a single Stackdriver account for one of the projects. In Stackdriver, create a group and add the other project names as criteria for that group. For analysis purposes, you need to send all the logs from all of your Compute Engine instances to a BigQuery dataset called Platform Logs. You have already installed the Cloud Logging Agent on all the instances. You want to minimize cost. What should you do? A. 1. Give the BigQuery data editor role on the platform logs dataset to the service accounts used by your instances. 2. Update your instance's metadata to add the following value: logs destination, BQ://platform logs. B1. In cloud logging, create a logs export with a Cloud Pub subtopic called logs as a sync. 2. Create a cloud function that is triggered by messages in the logs topic. 3. Configure the cloud function to drop logs that are not from Compute Engine and to insert Compute Engine logs in the platform logs dataset. C1. In cloud logging, create a filter to view only Compute Engine logs. 2. Click Create Export. 3. Choose BigQuery as sync service and the platform logs dataset as sync destination. B1. Create a cloud function that has the BigQuery user role on the platform logs dataset. 2. Configure this cloud function to create a BigQuery job that executes this query. Insert into dataset. Platform logs, timestamp log, select timestamp, log from compute. Logs where timestamp greater than date, underscore, sub, current underscore date, interval 1 day 3. Use Cloud Scheduler to trigger this cloud function once a day. You want to host your video encoding software on Compute Engine. Your user base is growing rapidly, and users need to be able to encode their videos at any time without interruption or CPU limitations. You must ensure that your encoding solution is highly available, and you want to follow Google recommended practices to automate operations. What should you do? A. Deploy your solution on multiple standalone Compute Engine instances and increase the number of existing instances when CPU utilization on cloud monitoring reaches a certain threshold. B. Deploy your solution on multiple standalone Compute Engine instances and replace existing instances with high CPU instances when CPU utilization on cloud monitoring reaches a certain threshold. C. Deploy your solution to an instance group and increase the number of available instances whenever you see high CPU utilization in cloud monitoring. D. Deploy your solution to an instance group and set the auto-scaling based on CPU utilization. You have a development project with appropriate IAM roles defined. You are creating a production project and want to have the same IAM roles on the new project, using the fewest possible steps. What should you do? A. Use Cloud IAM roles copy and specify the production project as the destination project. B. Use gCloud IAM roles copy and specify your organization as the destination organization. C. In the Google Cloud Platform Console, use the Create Role from Role functionality. D. In the Google Cloud Platform Console, use the Create Role functionality and select all applicable permissions. You have been asked to set up Object Lifecycle Management for objects stored in storage buckets. The objects are written once and accessed frequently for 30 days. After 30 days, the objects are not read again unless there is a special need. The objects should be kept for 3 years, and you need to minimize cost. What should you do? A. Set up a policy that uses nearline storage for 30 days and then moves to archive storage for 3 years. B. Set up a policy that uses standard storage for 30 days and then moves to archive storage for 3 years. C. Set up a policy that uses nearline storage for 30 days, then moves the cold line for 1 year, and then moves to archive storage for 2 years. D. Set up a policy that uses standard storage for 30 days, then moves to cold line for 1 year, and then moves to archive storage for 2 years. Your company has a large quantity of unstructured data in different file formats. You want to perform ETL transformations on the data. You need to make the data accessible on Google Cloud, so it can be processed by a data flow job. What should you do? A. Upload the data to BigQuery using the BQ command line tool. B. Upload the data to cloud storage using the gsutil command line tool. C. Upload the data into Cloud SQL using the import function in the console. D. Upload the data into Cloud Spanner using the import function in the console. You have a Linux VM that must connect to Cloud SQL. You created a service account with the appropriate access rights. You want to make sure that the VM uses this service account instead of the default Compute Engine service account. What should you do? A. When creating the VM via the web console, specify the service account under the Identity and API Accesses section. B. Download a JSON private key for the service account. On the project metadata, add that JSON as the value for the key Compute Engine service account. C. Download a JSON private key for the service account. On the custom metadata of the VM, add that JSON as the value for the key Compute Engine service account. D. Download a JSON private key for the service account. After creating the VM, SSH into the VM and save the JSON under ~gcloud/Compute Engine service account JSON. Your company wants to migrate their on-premises workloads to Google Cloud. The current on-premises workloads consist of a Flask web application, a backend API, a scheduled long-running background job for ETL and reporting. You need to keep operational costs low. You want to follow Google recommended practices to migrate these workloads to serverless solutions on Google Cloud. What should you do? A. Migrate the web application to App Engine and the backend API to Cloud Run. Use Cloud Tasks to run your background job on Compute Engine. B. Migrate the web application to App Engine and the backend API to Cloud Run. Use Cloud Tasks to run your background job on Cloud Run. C. Run the web application on a cloud storage bucket and the backend API on Cloud Run. Use Cloud Tasks to run your background job on Cloud Run. D. Run the web application on a cloud storage bucket and the backend API on Cloud Run. Use Cloud Tasks to run your background job on Compute Engine. You have a Bigtable instance that consists of 3 nodes that store personally identifiable information, PII, data. You need to log all read or write operations, including any metadata or configuration reads of this database table, in your company's Security Information and Event Management (SIEM) system. What should you do? A. Navigate to Cloud Monitoring in the Google Cloud Console and create a custom monitoring job for the Bigtable instance to track all changes. Create an alert by using webhook endpoints, with a SIEM endpoint as a receiver. B. Navigate to the Audit Logs page in the Google Cloud Console and enable admin write logs for the Bigtable instance. Create a Cloud Functions instance to export logs from Cloud Logging to your SIEM. C. Navigate to the Audit Logs page in the Google Cloud Console and enable Data Read, Data Write, and Admin Read logs for the Bigtable instance. Create a pub subtopic as a Cloud Logging sync destination and add your SIEM as a subscriber to the topic. D. Install the Ops agent on the Bigtable instance during configuration. Create a service account with read permissions for the Bigtable instance. Create a custom data flow job with this service account to export logs to the company's SIEM system. You need to host an application on a compute engine instance in a project shared with other teams. You want to prevent the other teams from accidentally causing downtime on that application. Which feature should you use? A. Use a shielded VM. B. Use a preemptible VM. C. Use a sole tenant node. D. Enable deletion protection on the instance. You have a compute engine instance hosting a production application. You want to receive an email if the instance consumes more than 90% of its CPU resources for more than 15 minutes. You want to use Google services. What should you do? A. 1. Create a consumer Gmail account. 2. Write a script that monitors the CPU usage. 3. When the CPU usage exceeds the threshold, have that script send an email using the Gmail account and smtp.gmail.com on port 25 as SMTP server. B. 1. Create a cloud monitoring workspace and associate your Google Cloud Platform (GCP) project with it. 2. Create a cloud monitoring alerting policy that uses the threshold as a trigger condition. 3. Configure your email address in the notification channel. C. 1. Create a cloud monitoring workspace and associate your GCP project with it. 2. Write a script that monitors the CPU usage and sends it as a custom metric to cloud monitoring. 3. Create an uptime check for the instance in cloud monitoring. D. 1. In cloud logging, create a logs-based metric to extract the CPU usage by using this regular expression: CPU usage 0 to 913%. 2. In cloud monitoring, create an alerting policy based on this metric. 3. Configure your email address in the notification channel. You need to create a copy of a custom compute engine virtual machine (VM) to facilitate an expected increase in application traffic due to a business acquisition. What should you do? A. Create a compute engine snapshot of your base VM. Create your images from that snapshot. B. Create a compute engine snapshot of your base VM. Create your instances from that snapshot. C. Create a custom compute engine image from a snapshot. Create your images from that image. D. Create a custom compute engine image from a snapshot. Create your instances from that image. Your company uses BigQuery for data warehousing. Over time, many different business units in your company have created 1,000 plus datasets across hundreds of projects. Your CIO wants you to examine all datasets to find tables that contain an employee_SSN column. You want to minimize effort in performing this task. What should you do? A. Go to Data Catalog and search for employee_SSN in the search box. B. Write a shell script that uses the BQ command line tool to loop through all the projects in your organization. C. Write a script that loops through all the projects in your organization and runs a query on information_schema columns view to find the employee_SSN column. D. Write a cloud data flow job that loops through all the projects in your organization and runs a query on information_schema columns view to find employee_SSN column. Your VMs are running in a subnet that has a subnet mask of 255.25.5.255.25.240. The current subnet has no more free IP addresses, and you require an additional 10 IP addresses for new VMs. The existing and new VMs should all be able to reach each other without additional routes. What should you do? A. Use Gloud to expand the IP range of the current subnet. B. Delete the subnet and recreate it using a wider range of IP addresses. C. Create a new project. Use shared VPC to share the current network with the new project. D. Create a new subnet with the same starting IP, but a wider range to overwrite the current subnet. Your company implemented BigQuery as an enterprise data warehouse. Users from multiple business units run queries on this data warehouse. However, you notice that query costs for BigQuery are very high, and you need to control costs. Which two methods should you use? Choose two. A. Split the users from business units to multiple projects. B. Apply a user or project-level custom query quota for BigQuery data warehouse. C. Create separate copies of your BigQuery data warehouse for each business unit. B. Split your BigQuery data warehouse into multiple data warehouses for each business unit. E. Change your BigQuery query model from on-demand to flat rate. Apply the appropriate number of slots to each project. You host a static website on cloud storage. Recently, you began to include links to PDF files on this site. Currently, when users click on the links to these PDF files, their browsers prompt them to save the file onto their local system. Instead, you want the clicked PDF files to be displayed within the browser window directly, without prompting the user to save the file locally. What should you do? A. Enable Cloud CDN on the website frontend. B. Enable Share Publicly on the PDF file objects. C. Set Content Type Metadata to Application SAKEDF on the PDF file objects. D. Add a label to the storage bucket with a key of content type and value of application TAPDF. You want to verify the IAM users and roles assigned within a GCP project named My Project. What should you do? A. Run Cloud IAM roles list. Review the output section. B. Run gCloud IAM service accounts list. Review the output section. C. Navigate to the project and then to the IAM section in the GCP console. Review the members and roles. D. Navigate to the project and then to the roles section in the GCP console. Review the roles and status. You are using Container Registry to centrally store your company's container images in a separate project. In another project, you want to create a Google Kubernetes Engine (GKE) cluster. You want to ensure that Kubernetes can download images from Container Registry. What should you do? A. In the project where the images are stored, grant the Storage Object Viewer IAM role to the service account used by the Kubernetes nodes. B. When you create the GKE cluster, choose the Allow Full Access to All Cloud APIs option under Access Scopes. C. Create a service account and give it access to cloud storage. Create AP12 key for this service account and use it as an image pull secrets in Kubernetes. D. Configure the ACLs on each image in cloud storage to give read-only access to the default Compute Engine service account. You are working for a hospital that stores its medical images in an on-premises data room. The hospital wants to use cloud storage for archival storage of these images. The hospital wants an automated process to upload any new medical images to cloud storage. You need to design and implement a solution. What should you do? A. Create a pub subtopic and enable a cloud storage trigger for the pub subtopic. Create an application that sends all medical images to the pub sub topic. B. Deploy a data flow job from the batch template, a Euro data store, to cloud storage. Euro schedule the batch job on the desired interval. C. Create a script that uses the G-Sutil command line interface to synchronize the on-premises storage with cloud storage. Schedule the script as a cron job. D. In the Cloud Console, go to Cloud Storage. Upload the relevant images to the appropriate bucket. Your company developed a mobile game that is deployed on Google Cloud. Gamers are connecting to the game with their personal phones over the internet. The game sends UDP packets to update the servers about the gamer's actions while they are playing in multiplayer mode. Your game backend can scale over multiple virtual machines, VMs, and you want to expose the VMs over a single IP address. What should you do? A. Configure an SSL proxy load balancer in front of the application servers. B. Configure an internal UDP load balancer in front of the application servers. C. Configure an external HTTP's load balancer in front of the application servers. D. Configure an external network load balancer in front of the application servers. You are the team lead of a group of 10 developers. You provided each developer with an individual Google Cloud project that they can use as their personal sandbox to experiment with different Google Cloud solutions. You want to be notified if any of the developers are spending above $500 per month on their sandbox environment. What should you do? A. Create a single budget for all projects and configure budget alerts on this budget. B. Create a separate billing account per sandbox project and enable BigQuery billing exports. Create a Data Studio dashboard to plot the spending per billing account. C. Create a budget per project and configure budget alerts on all of these budgets. D. Create a single billing account for all sandbox projects and enable BigQuery billing exports. Create a Data Studio dashboard to plot the spending per project. You have created a code snippet that should be triggered whenever a new file is uploaded to a cloud storage bucket. You want to deploy this code snippet. What should you do? A. Use App Engine and configure Cloud Scheduler to trigger the application using pub sub. B. Use Cloud Functions and configure the bucket as a trigger resource. C. Use Google Kubernetes Engine and configure a cron job to trigger the application using pub sub. D. Use Dataflow as a batch job and configure the bucket as a data source. You are working with a user to set up an application in a new VPC behind a firewall. The user is concerned about data egress. You want to configure the fewest open egress ports. What should you do? A. Set up a low priority 65,534 rule that blocks all egress and a high priority rule 1,000 that allows only the appropriate ports. B. Set up a high priority 1,000 rule that pairs both ingress and egress ports. C. Set up a high priority 1,000 rule that blocks all egress and a low priority 65,534 rule that allows only the appropriate ports. D. Set up a high priority 1,000 rule to allow the appropriate ports. Your team maintains the infrastructure for your organization. The current infrastructure requires changes. You need to share your proposed changes with the rest of the team. You want to follow Google's recommended best practices. What should you do? A. Use Deployment Manager templates to describe the proposed changes and store them in a cloud storage bucket. B. Use Deployment Manager templates to describe the proposed changes and store them in cloud source repositories. C. Apply the changes in a development environment, run Cloud Compute Instances list, and then save the output in a shared storage bucket. A. Apply the changes in a development environment, run Cloud Compute Instances list, and then save the output in cloud source repositories. You need to assign a Cloud Identity and Access Management (Cloud IAM) role to an external auditor. The auditor needs to have permissions to review your Google Cloud Platform (GCP) audit logs and also to review your data access logs. What should you do? A. Assign the auditor the IAM role roles, logging, private log viewer. Perform the export of logs to cloud storage. B. Assign the auditor the IAM role roles/logging, private log viewer. Direct the auditor to also review the logs for changes to Cloud IAM policy. C. Assign the auditor's IAM user to a custom role that has logging, private log entries, list permission. Perform the export of logs to cloud storage. D. Assign the auditor's IAM user to a custom role that has logging, private log entries, list permission. Direct the auditor to also review the logs for changes to Cloud IAM policy. You want to configure 10 Compute Engine instances for availability when maintenance occurs. Your requirements state that these instances should attempt to automatically restart if they crash. Also, the instances should be highly available, including during system maintenance. What should you do? A. Create an instance template for the instances. Set the automatic restart to on. Set the on-host maintenance to migrate VM instance. Add the instance template to an instance group. B. Create an instance template for the instances. Set automatic restart to off. Set on-host maintenance to terminate VM instances. Add the instance template to an instance group. C. Create an instance group for the instances. Set the auto-healing health check to healthy, HTTP. D. Create an instance group for the instance. Verify that the advanced creation option setting for do not retry machine creation is set to off. You are building a product on top of Google Kubernetes Engine, GKE. You have a single GKE cluster. For each of your customers, a pod is running in that cluster, and your customers can run arbitrary code inside their pod. You want to maximize the isolation between your customers' pods. What should you do? A. Use binary authorization and whitelist only the container images used by your customers' pods. B. Use the Container Analysis API to detect vulnerabilities in the containers used by your customers' pods. C. Create a GKE node pool with a sandbox type configured to gvisor. Add the parameter runtime class name, gvisor, to the specification of your customer's pods. D. Use the COS_containered image for your GKE nodes. Add a node selector with the value cloud.google.com/gk-os-distribution :cos_containered to the specification of your customer's pod.